In 1937, Japan was rising, fast, ambitious, and hungry for dominance over the Pacific. But behind every empire lies an engineer, and behind Japan's new wings was a man named Jiro Horikoshi. At just 30 years old, Horikoshi dreamed of creating the lightest, fastest fighter plane the world had ever seen. He believed that speed was the purest form of defense. "If the enemy cannot catch you," he once said, "he cannot kill you." His vision would become the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, an aircraft that would redefine aerial warfare. When the Imperial Navy issued its challenge to Japanese manufacturers in 1937, they wanted a miracle, a plane that could outfight every Western design, fly over 2,000 kilometers, and still land safely on the deck of a carrier. To most, it was impossible. To Horikoshi, it was destiny. Working day and night in the small Mitsubishi plant in Nagoya, he and his team stripped weight from every screw and panel. They used a new aluminum alloy so light it felt like paper, yet strong enough to resist the wind at 600 kilometers per hour. Even the glass canopy was thinned, reshaped to cut through air like a blade. By 1939, the prototype was ready. Its wings curved in elegant arcs, its fuselage balanced like a sword. The engineers called it Reisen, short for Reisen Toki, Type Zero fighter. To the world, it would become simply the Zero. The first flight stunned even the test pilots. It climbed faster than anything Japan had ever built, turned tighter than a swallow, and landed gently on carrier decks. One pilot wrote, "It feels like the aircraft reads my thoughts." But the secret behind that grace was also its curse. It was fragile. There was almost no armor. The fuel tanks were exposed. It wasn't designed to survive hits. It was designed not to get hit at all. In a time of pride and rising nationalism, that fragility was ignored. Speed and beauty were celebrated. The engineers believed their machine was untouchable. They were wrong, but in 1940, the world hadn't learned that yet. When the Zero entered combat over China that year, it erased everything in its path. American and British-built planes fell like paper. In less than 6 months, Japan controlled the skies over Shanghai, Hankou, and the coastlines. The Allies had never seen anything move like it. From that moment, the Zero became more than a weapon. It became a symbol. A silver ghost dancing through clouds, unstoppable, elegant, deadly. Horikoshi's dream had taken flight. But every dream, when built for war, eventually falls back to earth. By 1941, the Pacific war machine was unstoppable. Japan's empire had stretched from Manchuria to the Philippines, from the jungles of Burma to the blue horizon of Hawaii. And leading the charge was the Zero, Japan's silent angel of death. At dawn on December 7, 1941, 6 Japanese carriers launched 353 aircraft toward Pearl Harbor. Among them, 43 Zeros carved through the morning sky. They flew low, silent, and precise, their wings glinting in the first light. When they struck, they didn't miss. American ships burned. The air was filled with smoke and shock. But what haunted the survivors wasn't just the destruction, it was the speed. The Zeros seemed to appear and vanish, their engines singing a strange metallic hum before disappearing into the clouds. In those hours, the world realized that Japan had built something terrifying. Newspapers called it the ghost plane. Allied engineers refused to believe that such range and maneuverability were possible in one design, but it was real. In the following months, the Zero ruled the Pacific. From the Philippines to Singapore, from Java to Darwin, everywhere it went, the sky belonged to Japan. Pilots who faced it often didn't live long enough to report what they saw. In dogfights, the Zero could turn inside any opponent. Its pilots called it Tenno Tsubasa, wings of heaven. But the truth was darker. Many of those wings would soon burn in that same sky. The Allies needed a miracle, and they got one, but not by design. In June 1942, on a small island near Alaska called Akutan, an American PBY patrol spotted a crashed Zero. The pilot had died, but the aircraft was almost perfectly intact. Engineers shipped it to San Diego, where they tore it apart and studied every piece. For the first time, the United States saw the Zero's secret. Speed at the cost of survival. No armor, no fuel protection, no forgiveness for mistakes. It was a racing plane disguised as a war machine. That discovery changed everything. New tactics were born. Never turn with a Zero. Dive instead, use your weight and gravity. By the time the U.S. Navy developed the Hellcat and Corsair, they had built planes that could finally face the ghost. The hunter was becoming the hunted. And for the first time, the pilots of the Empire began to feel fear. The Zero was still fast, still graceful, but now the sky was learning its name. By mid-1943, the Empire's skies were changing. What had begun as domination was now a slow, invisible decline. For the first time, Japanese pilots began to lose control of the air. Not because they had forgotten how to fight, but because the world had learned how to fight them. The Akutan Zero had given the Allies a gift: knowledge. From its broken metal came a new manual of war. American pilots were trained never to engage the Zero in a turning fight. Instead, they attacked from above, dove at high speed, and climbed back out before the Japanese could react. Boom and zoom, they called it. To the Zero pilots, it felt like facing ghosts that struck once and vanished. In the skies above Guadalcanal, the myth of invincibility began to crack. For every Japanese pilot lost, there were fewer to replace him. Training schools that once took years to forge, a warrior now, pushed cadets into battle after only weeks. Experience, that invisible armor, was disappearing faster than steel. Fuel was short, ammunition scarcer, and the Zeros that once danced through clouds now fought under dark skies filled with tracer fire and doubt. Still they flew. Still they fought. For them, defeat was not an option. Every Zero that rose from a carrier deck carried more than bullets. It carried pride, honor, and denial. In July 1943, over the Solomon Islands, an American ace named Tom Blackburn wrote in his diary, "They don't quit. Even burning, they turn back to fight again. You don't hate them, you fear them." The tide had turned, but the legend remained. The Zero was no longer the king of the sky. It was a ghost refusing to leave. 1944. The Pacific was a graveyard of steel and fire. The once proud Imperial Navy was bleeding ships faster than it could build them. And its pilots, the sons of an empire, were vanishing faster than anyone dared admit. Japan's airfields were losing more than planes. They were losing men, hope, and fuel. The Zero, once a symbol of endless reach, was now grounded by shortages. Even the most skilled pilots were forced to ration every bullet, every drop of aviation spirit. They believed the Zero could still win. They believed their pilots were born of divine wind, kamikaze. In late 1944, that word took on a new, deadly meaning. Young men, some barely 17, volunteered to die inside the aircraft they loved. To them, crashing into an enemy carrier wasn't defeat, it was duty. The Zero became their vessel, their altar, their final confession to history. From the decks of the USS Essex, sailors watched in horror as waves of Zeros dove through flak and fire. One struck the flight deck directly. Another missed by inches and exploded in the sea. Even when they failed, they terrified. To many Americans, these attacks seemed insane. But to Japan, they were logical, the last act of a dying sun. In the wreckage of those skies, one truth became clear. The Zero had been built to live forever in the air. Now it lived forever in memory. April 1945. The war was almost over, though few in Japan would admit it. The Zero was now outdated, slower, weaker, and fragile against the new Allied jets and bombers that dominated the sky. Yet even in its twilight, the Zero refused to vanish quietly. In Okinawa, hundreds of them rose for one last campaign, Operation Kikusui. Floating chrysanthemum. The name itself sounded poetic, almost peaceful, but it was anything but. In 10 waves between April and June, over 1,400 Zeros were launched against the American fleet. Most never returned. Some crashed before reaching their targets, shot down by overwhelming firepower. Others found their mark, striking ships like the USS Bunker Hill and USS Enterprise in deadly final dives. Survivors from both sides recalled the same sight, a plane engulfed in flame, yet still guiding itself downward with eerie precision. Even in death, the Zero moved with grace. But by that summer, the empire was burning. Cities were ashes, skies full of American bombers, and the once proud factories that built the Zero were silent ruins. Jiro Horikoshi, the man who had dreamed of a perfect aircraft, now watched from his workshop. Window, as his creation, vanished from the world he once hoped to protect. In his final notes, he wrote, "I wanted to build something beautiful. I did not mean for it to kill." The last Zero flew in August 1945. The same month Hiroshima and Nagasaki fell under atomic light. When Japan surrendered, so too did the legend of the unkillable plane. But legends do not end, they echo. The war was over, but the Zero refused to die. In museums, in stories, in the quiet conversations of veterans, it lingered, a ghost of aluminum and fire. The Allies who had once feared it began to respect it. American engineers studied its curves. European designers copied its weight ratios. Even the first jet engineers acknowledged its genius. To build fast, first you must build light. In 1950, former Japanese pilots who had survived the war gathered at Haneda Airfield. Among them was Saburo Sakai, the famed ace who had fought more than 200 battles and lived. He touched the wing of a preserved Zero and said quietly, "She gave us wings when we were boys. She took them when we became men." The Zero had become something beyond war, a mirror of humanity itself. Brilliance and tragedy in one frame. Perfection and destruction welded together. Today, restored Zeros still fly at air shows. Their engines roar like ghosts waking from sleep. Crowds look up in awe, never realizing that what they're seeing isn't just history, it's warning. Because every machine built for glory carries the seed of its own destruction. And every warplane, no matter how perfect, eventually runs out of sky. The Zero never wanted to be a symbol, but time made it one, of genius, of courage, of obsession. A story that began in ambition and ended in sacrifice. The plane that wouldn't die finally found peace in silence. History often remembers machines, not the men who dreamed them. But behind the legend of the Zero stood a quiet engineer, Jiro Horikoshi. While the world called his creation a miracle of flight, he saw something else, a reflection of his country's pride and its downfall. When the war began, Horikoshi was celebrated as a national hero. His design had made Japan untouchable. Posters showed the Zero soaring above the rising sun, a symbol of destiny. He was honored, praised, and burdened. But by 1944, the tone had changed. Factories were empty, workers starving, young boys replacing skilled pilots. Horikoshi's team struggled to keep production alive, forced to simplify parts, reuse damaged metals, and watch quality decline. He visited airfields where Zeros stood in lines like tombstones, pilots climbing into them for missions they would not return from. Each takeoff was a goodbye. He later wrote, "When I saw boys younger than my son smiling before they flew to die, I knew we had lost not only the war but our humanity." After Japan's surrender, Horikoshi wasn't executed or imprisoned. He was silenced. For years, his name disappeared from textbooks, his work buried under shame. But in time, the world rediscovered him, not as a weapon maker, but as a man who built beauty in a time of madness. In the 1950s, he returned to design civilian aircraft. He refused to build another machine of war. His autobiography, The Wind Rises, would one day inspire a film by Studio Ghibli, a poetic tribute to a man who wanted to touch the sky, not burn beneath it. When asked late in life if he regretted building the Zero, Horikoshi simply said, "I wanted to create something beautiful. It was others who turned beauty into destruction." His words remain etched in the story of aviation, reminding us that genius without wisdom is just another kind of weapon. The Zero story didn't end in 1945. It became part of something larger, a question humanity still asks. How far will we go in the name of progress? From its aluminum bones came lessons that shaped every aircraft to follow. The Americans borrowed its lightweight structure for early jet prototypes. The British studied its turn radius and wing stress. Even modern engineers cite its design as a milestone in aerodynamic purity. But more than a machine, the Zero became a mirror showing both brilliance and blindness. It proved that perfection achieved without conscience is temporary, and that war transforms innovation into tragedy. When you stand before a preserved Zero in a museum, its polished frame gleaming under soft lights, it's easy to forget what it cost. The boys who flew it, the cities that fell beneath it, the dreams of one engineer who wanted to soar, and the empire that used his dream to fall. Today, there are only a few Zeros left that can still fly. Each one is a whisper of the past, its propeller cutting through air heavy with ghosts. When the engine roars, it doesn't sound like victory. It sounds like memory. Visitors at air shows often look up and see nothing but beauty. But for those who know the story, it's something more profound. A warning carved in metal and motion. Every era builds its own Zero. Every generation believes it can fly faster than consequence. And every time the sky reminds us, no machine is unkillable, no empire eternal, and no dream free from its shadow. As the last light fades over the Pacific, you can almost hear the echo of those engines, fading, distant, eternal. The plane that wouldn't die finally rests among the clouds, immortal not because it survived, but because it taught us what it means to fall.